Is it a bad habit to always shoot wide open? If you follow my photography, you may have noticed that I love to photograph wildlife with fast lenses shooting wide open with a shallow depth of field, where only the subject is sharp and clear, but everything else soft and out of focus. But over the years, I have learned that shooting wide open all the time has become a bad habit and can ruin a lot of shots. So in today's video, I will highlight the challenges and limitations that come with using wide aperture, and I will show you plenty of examples where I use high f-stops to get that perfect shot. My name is Charl and I am a professional wildlife photographer with Pangolin Photo Safaris. If you like to join our growing community of wildlife photography enthusiasts, consider subscribing to our channel so that you don't miss out on any of our tutorials, gear review or trip videos. Before I get into why I think it is a bad habit to always shoot wide open, let me briefly explain the terminology wide open. Wide open refers to using the widest or maximum aperture available on your lens. The aperture is measuring in f-stops, and a wide aperture means using a low f-stop number like f5.6, f4 or even 2.8 depending on the lens you use. When you shoot wide open, you are letting in the maximum amount of light through the lens, which has several effects like creating a shallow depth of field, the ability to shoot in low light, and creating a beautiful bouquet. A shallow depth of field means that only a narrow plane of the image will be in sharp focus, while the foreground and the background will appear blurred. This effect is often used to isolate subject from their surroundings and create a sense of depth or emphasis on the subject. So the aperture we choose will determine how much depth of field we get and how much of the subject will be in focus. However, the aperture isn't the only factor that influences the depth of field. The focal length of the lens and the distance to the subject also has a great impact on how much is in focus. And since depth of field is a key compositional element to create striking photographs, it is important to know and understand what affects depth of field. Here is an image of two lion cubs playing in the distance that I took with my 400mm lens at f2.8. Both animals are in focus because they were far away and therefore the depth of field was naturally larger. But now look at the image where I was a lot closer to the subject. The depth of field is much shallower using the same equipment and aperture settings. Only a few millimeters around the eye are in sharp focus. This can be a nice effect to direct the viewer's attention to a specific point in the image. The next image uses the very same technique but using a longer focal length of 600mm and being even closer to the subject meant that I needed to stop down to f8 to get the entire eye of the elephant in focus. So now that you've learned that the distance to the subject and the focal length of your lens heavily influence the depth of field as well as the aperture settings, let me explain when it is beneficial to stop down to a narrower aperture. I've made this mistake many times, favoring a buttery smooth background over getting a tack sharp subject. You can see that the bird's eye, head and beak is sharp, but then the sharpness falls off towards the rest of the body, the feet and the branch the bird sits on. Shooting wide open was not the best choice, and stopping the aperture down instead of shooting wide open would have resulted in a sharper subject with more clarity and detail and still enough background separation. Like this image of a cuckoo taken with the same lens at 7.1. Stopping down is even more important when you're photographing multiple birds or animals, especially when they interact with each other. I have taken these wide-fronted bee-eaters with my 400mm lens and a 2x teleconverter, and even though I stopped down to f8, only one of the birds is in sharp focus. This is because of the different distances of the birds to the image sensor. You can of course be lucky and have two subjects in the same focal plane and get both in focus, even when using a wide aperture setting. But most times you will find that this is not the case, and stopping down will increase your chances on a specific shot immensely. But keep in mind that the aperture is a creative tool and should be used according to the situation. Just because you have more than one animal in the frame does not always mean that you must increase the aperture. A shallow depth of field can yield stunning results too when executed correctly. Achieving critical focus on fast-moving wildlife can be challenging with wide apertures as well. The shallow depth of field means that even slight focus shift during animal tracking can result in part of the subject being out of focus. Using a narrow aperture increases the depth of field, making it easier to maintain sharpness across the subject. Stopping down will also help to have a better sharpness towards the corners of the frame, and often when tracking a bird in flight, this can help a great deal. It can also help when birds dive or bath in the water. First of all, it's difficult to depict the exact spot where they go in or come out of the water. And secondly, the camera's focus system likes to focus on the splashing water rather than the bird. Using a deeper depth of field will help immensely to nail a shot like this. Something to keep in mind though when shooting with narrower aperture is that the light intake is reduced, which results in higher ISOs than shooting wide open. As everything in photography, this is a trade-off you must be willing to take. But image sensors of modern cameras and noise reduction software has come a long way, and you can still get decent results even with slightly higher ISOs. From my experience out in the field shooting with several different lenses from primes to third-party zoom lenses, stopping down one or two stops from the maximum aperture of the lens is beneficial for overall sharpness and clarity. Whenever you have time with a subject, make a habit of shooting wide open and then take stops down gradually to learn the focus performance of your lens and the look you personally like. The same applies when using teleconverters. Different brands perform differently, and you will need to get to know your own equipment to make better decisions on aperture settings in the future. As a summary and general guidance, stop down the aperture if you are close to the subject and the background is far away from the subject. If you photograph multiple subjects and want all to be in sharp focus. If you photograph fast-moving wildlife when focus accuracy is difficult, and when using teleconverters or third-party lenses. Understanding when to use wide apertures and when to opt for the smaller ones is key to achieve diverse and compelling wildlife images. And I hope this tutorial helped you to understand all the factors that influence depth of field, so you can choose the right aperture according to the situation instead of shooting wide open all the time. As always, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Until next time, and happy shooting.